The morning sun filtered gently through the tall stained-glass windows of the Church of San Marco, casting a cascade of vibrant colors that danced across the time-worn stone walls. A soft breeze stirred the red velvet banners hanging high above the pews, giving life to the sacred silence of the sanctuary. Though the church was often tranquil at this hour, today it pulsed with murmurs and quiet movement. Wooden benches groaned under the weight of an assembling crowd. Men and women gathered for a singular reason: to hear the weekly sermon of Sister Olivia. She emerged, cloaked in a crisp black robe, a silver crucifix gleaming against her chest, each step toward the pulpit echoing with quiet authority. Her eyes shimmered with an unmistakable fire, part devotion, part defiance, and her presence commanded attention. Many admired her, especially the younger women, drawn to her bold words and unwavering faith. Yet beneath that fire burned something unacknowledged even by her, a flame stoked not by love, but by resentment. She inhaled deeply, steadied herself, and then spoke, her voice cutting through the murmur like a blade. "My brothers and sisters," she began, "we live in a world shaken by a belief cloaked in religion, a belief that does not bring peace, but chains." The congregation leaned forward, her words stung with intensity. They call their God by another name, yet deny his love through Jesus. They claim to honor women, yet force them to shroud their bodies in shame. They profess truth, yet reject the cross, the very symbol of salvation. Heads nodded solemnly. Olivia's voice swelled with growing emotion. They reject the blood that redeemed us. They say our Savior did not die, did not rise, and they call this faith? Number, it is deception. She paused, surveying the room. Some listeners shifted uncomfortably. The air grew dense, but she pressed on, reaching into her robe and unfolding several papers, news clippings, quotes, online reports, saved precisely for this occasion. With deliberate drama, she read them aloud. They ban music. They forbid love. They suppress laughter and claim a woman's smile is temptation. Is this a religion or a prison of fear? The final words lingered like smoke in the vaulted space, curling into the silence. Outside the chapel, in the church's side garden, an elderly man walked slowly among the hedges, his pace interrupted by the echo of her sermon piercing the morning air. Prayer beads slipped gently through his fingers, his white turban tilting slightly in the breeze. His expression was serene, but his eyes were burdened by sorrow. He recognized the accusations too well, accusations he had heard for decades, but never like this. Never within a house of worship. His name was Imam Yusuf Rahman, a humble scholar known not for fiery speeches but for deep compassion and wisdom. He had never entered the church, not out of fear, but respect. Today, that respect demanded action. Not to confront, but to correct. Not to challenge, but to clarify. With resolve, he walked towards the great wooden doors. They groaned under his touch as he opened them. The congregation turned in surprise, their whispers rising. Sister Olivia stiffened at the pulpit as the elderly man in white robes moved slowly but steadily down the center aisle, his eyes low, his steps reverent. No one recognized him, yet his presence commanded silence. "Excuse me, sir," Olivia said sharply. "This is not a place for uninvited guests." Imam Yusuf did not reply immediately. He stopped mid-aisle, then looked up gently. "I come not to interrupt but to ask. May I respond? Not in anger, but in honesty." All eyes shifted to the senior priest seated by the altar. He hesitated, but before he could speak, Olivia replied, her tone crisp. "This church stands on the truth of Christ, not the doctrines of other faiths. But go on. Speak, if you must. Just don't expect us to be persuaded." The imam nodded with grace. "Truth needs no force," he said softly. "It only needs to be heard." He did not mount the pulpit. Instead, he stood respectfully beside it, visible, yet not imposing. Olivia folded her arms. Let's begin, then. You're a Muslim. Why does your religion deny the divinity of Jesus? Imam Yusuf replied calmly, because we believe worship belongs only to God. We honor Jesus as a prophet, a messenger, a beloved servant of God. But we do not worship him, just as we do not worship any human being. Olivia countered, but salvation comes through the cross. By denying that, aren't you rejecting salvation itself? He shook his head gently. We believe salvation comes from sincere faith and righteous action. Forgiveness is a mercy from God, not a debt paid in blood. If God is truly merciful, does he require a death to forgive? The church grew still. The imam's voice remained gentle, yet unwavering. A few listeners began to lean in. What about history? Olivia challenged. Islam spread by the sword. Yusuf responded. Islam spread through merchants, scholars, and invitations, not conquest. Yes, wars occurred, but in defense, not aggression. If it were spread by force, would Christians still live in Egypt? Would Jews remain in Morocco? And yet, they do. There was a murmur of realization. Olivia pressed on. And women? Why are they forced to cover up? Why don't they have equal rights? The imam met her gaze, not with defiance, but sincerity. Covering is not shame, it is dignity. As you wear your robe and crucifix, our women wear their modesty as a symbol of faith and self-respect. Roles may differ, but difference is not inequality. Where women are experts, such as childbirth, they are the sole witnesses. Olivia's frustration peaked. You speak like a poet. But Islam has rules for everything. How to eat, sleep, dress, even use the restroom. Where is the freedom? He smiled for the first time. Rules are not chains. They are guidance. Like a mother telling her child not to touch fire, God gives us boundaries, not to restrain, but to protect. More heads lowered in thought. And the afterlife? Olivia scoffed. Milk, silk, pearls, it sounds like fantasy. Imam Yusuf replied, These are symbols for human minds to grasp the ungraspable. Heaven is not about luxury, it is about peace. Peace with the one who made us. A hush fell, not of agreement, but attention. Then Olivia asked the question heavy on many minds. If Islam is so peaceful, why does it inspire fear? Why is it linked with terrorism, chaos, and violence? Yusuf paused, closing his eyes briefly before speaking. Because people don't know Islam. They know headlines. They know fear. They are afraid not of the faith, but of its distorted shadow. Like people once feared those with different skin, accents, or languages, not out of knowledge, but ignorance. Several nodded silently. But what of your Prophet Muhammad? Olivia pressed. Why believe in a man who wasn't educated, wasn't from the Jewish line, and never met Jesus? Imam Yusuf answered gently, That is exactly why you should inquire. He was unlettered, yet his words endure among the wisest. He had no power, no wealth, yet he transformed a violent tribal culture into one of justice and mercy. He suffered, bled, and starved for his message, and even his enemies called him the trustworthy. Olivia's voice dropped. He married many women, even young ones. Isn't that lust, not leadership? Most of his marriages, the imam said, were for protection. Widows, the elderly, the vulnerable. Only one was for love, his first, and he remained loyal to her until her death. The rest were part of his mission. A shift stirred among the clergy. This was not the confrontation they had feared. It was clarity. What about jihad? Olivia whispered. That word terrifies. Jihad means struggle, Yusuf explained. It is the struggle within, to conquer pride, anger, greed. It is also the defense of what is right, but it was never meant to terrorize. True jihad is the courage to do good even when it's difficult. He turned toward the congregation. If jihad were violence, why would our scriptures teach us to protect churches, synagogues, and prisoners of war? But your scripture says, "Kill them wherever you find them," Olivia interjected. Yes, he nodded, but that verse came during war, when Muslims were being hunted, tortured, and expelled. It is limited by justice. Do not fight unless attacked. Do not exceed what is just, even in war. For the first time, Olivia hesitated. If all that is true, she whispered, why do I feel nothing when I hear the word Islam? Not peace, but coldness, anger, doubt. Imam Yusuf stepped forward, his voice soft. Because you have not met Islam, you have met its enemies. You have seen smoke, not the fire's warmth. Faith cannot be known through firelight. It must be felt in the heart. Olivia trembled. Her clenched hands now signaled not anger, but turmoil. Then why, she asked brokenly, do I feel emptier every time I curse it? The Imam looked at her as a father might look upon a struggling child. Because your soul is searching for truth, he said, and it has begun to recognize it. Sometimes the truth wounds before it heals. Olivia, you're not fighting Islam. You're fighting the shadow of falsehoods you've inherited. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. She turned her face away, struggling to hold back the storm rising in her chest. The room around them was no longer just a church. It had transformed into a space far deeper, a sacred ground where belief battled fear and light wrestled with centuries of misunderstanding. She wiped her tears and, barely above a whisper, asked, "Why did you never get angry at me? At my words, my insults, my accusations?" Imam Yusuf offered a soft, knowing smile. Because I didn't come to win an argument. I came to ensure that truth would not remain silent, so that if even a single heart desired light, it would not be denied by darkness. Olivia said nothing. Her lips trembled, but no sound escaped. The audience sat frozen. No applause, no murmurs. Even the senior priest at the altar lowered his gaze, touched not by doctrine, but by the quiet certainty of a man who spoke without hatred. In that moment, Imam Yusuf felt less like a guest and more like a messenger of something timeless. Then Olivia lifted her gaze. Her voice cracked, but she forced it out. If Islam is so true, then why does it treat women like shadows? Why must they cover? Why can't they lead? Why are their words worth only half a man's? Imam Yusuf inhaled slowly, his eyes meeting hers not with judgment, but understanding. He saw not just a challenge, but pain. Pain shaped by years of misunderstanding. "I will answer," he said gently, "but only if your heart is truly ready to hear." The sunlight shifted, casting longer shadows along the church floor. Yet no one stirred. The air had grown heavy, not with tension, but with contemplation. It was as if time itself had bowed in reverence to what was unfolding. Sister Olivia stood, her hands gripping the edge of the pulpit, torn between defiance and a dawning humility. "I'm listening," she said, her voice no longer sharp, but almost sincere. Imam Yusuf nodded. "You asked why women in Islam are asked to cover, why they cannot lead prayers, and why their testimony, at times, is considered half of a man's. Let me address each with the dignity your questions deserve." He paused, scanning the congregation. Even the skeptics leaned forward now, their eyes fixed on him. Modesty in Islam is not a punishment. It is a protection. Women are not asked to cover because they are shameful, but because they are honored. Society often teaches us to value women by how much of their body they reveal. Islam teaches us to honor them for their intellect, their character, and their soul. He glanced at Olivia with compassion. It's not about hiding. It's about being truly seen. Not just for what you look like, but for who you are. In the front pew, a middle-aged woman blinked away tears, her hands gripping her purse. perhaps haunted by memories of being judged for her appearance. "But doesn't that limit their freedom?" Olivia interjected. "Shouldn't women choose what they wear, how they speak, where they go?" "Freedom without responsibility becomes chaos," Imam Yus replied. "If I walked into your home and said, 'I'm free to do whatever I want,' would that be freedom or disrespect?" He let the question linger. Islam defines freedom within purpose. Just as traffic laws don't enslave us, they keep us safe. The same applies to dress and behavior, especially in a world that constantly objectifies women. The veil is not a prison, it is a shield. Olivia shook her head slightly, but the fire in her eyes was dimming. "And the testimony of women?" she asked, quieter now. "That ruling," Imam Yusuf explained, pertained to financial contracts, a domain where, historically, women had less involvement. It was not a judgment of intellect, but a shared responsibility to prevent error. In other areas, such as childbirth or women's affairs, their testimony is equal, even preferred. He stepped forward, voice calm but firm. One of the greatest preservers of the Prophet's teachings was a woman, Aisha, a scholar, a jurist, a teacher of men. She narrated over 2,000 traditions and was consulted on law. Was she silenced, or was she empowered in a way few women in history have been? The church grew quieter still. Even Olivia paused, visibly affected. "Then why can't women lead the prayer?" she asked, holding his gaze. "Leading the prayer," he said, "is not a symbol of power. It is a structured role, designed for cohesion in ritual worship. But women lead in many other ways. They educate, they counsel, they inspire. History is rich with women, warriors, jurists, and spiritual guides." He turned to the congregation. "Islam does not restrict women. It elevates their strength, honors their dignity, and protects their roles. The issue isn't the faith, it's how people have misunderstood or misused it." There were soft murmurs now, not of objection, but reflection. Eyes turned to Olivia, waiting. "You've answered everything I threw at you," she said, calmer now. "But I have one more." Imam Yusuf gave a gentle nod. She stepped out from behind the pulpit, voice dropping to a near whisper. "If Islam is peaceful, then why does your book say, 'Kill them wherever you find them'? That doesn't sound like peace, that sounds like war." Imam Yusuf met her gaze, unwavering. "Yes, that verse exists, but it is part of a larger passage, revealed during a specific, historical conflict. It was a command to resist oppression, not to target the innocent. At the time, believers were being expelled, tortured, denied the right to worship. The same passage continues saying, 'Do not transgress. Do not fight unless you are attacked.'" He looked out over the pews. Every scripture has verses about war, punishment, fire. If taken out of context, any book becomes a weapon. The real question is, do we read them to understand or to hate? Olivia exhaled sharply through her nose, her composure cracking. "You speak of mercy," she said, "but your religion describes hell in such terrifying terms. Fire, smoke, suffering. It's brutal." Imam Yusuf nodded. "Because consequences are real, but those verses are not the whole message. They are warnings, like road signs that say, 'Danger ahead.' Even in the midst of those warnings, the Quran says, 'Do not despair.' God's mercy is vast. His forgiveness embraces even those who once mocked him, if they return." The stillness in the room deepened. Olivia bit her lip, eyes locked to the floor. Then, lifting her gaze again, "If your God is so merciful," she whispered, "why does he allow so much suffering?" Olivia's eyes filled once more, but this time not with resistance. She was truly listening now, not with her mind alone, but with something deeper. She sat slowly on the bench near the altar, shoulders slumped. Her voice, almost inaudible, carried the weight of years. If someone like me, who mocked your beliefs, insulted your people, wanted to learn the truth, would I have to give up who I am, my name, my past?" Imam Yusuf's eyes reflected decades of sorrow and hope. He smiled softly. "Number. You would not lose yourself. You would lose your confusion, your anger, your doubts. The truth doesn't erase who you are. It heals you. It completes you. It helps you become the best version of the person you've always been." A long silence followed, one not of discomfort, but of awakening. And then, like a prayer whispered into the void, Olivia asked the question no one expected. "What would it take to understand what you believe?" Her voice trembled, not with pride or protest, but with longing, as though for the first time she stood without armor, not as a defender of dogma, but as a soul aching for clarity. Imam Yusuf remained still, the colored light from the stained glass window washing over his robes. "It takes sincerity," he said quietly. "Not perfection, not rituals, not a change of name or skin or language, just a heart ready to search, with honesty, not arrogance." The church, once filled with tension, now felt sacred, alive. Something unseen had shifted. "I was taught to hate Islam since I was a child," Olivia confessed. "I preached against it. I warned people. I believed I was serving God." Imam Yusuf stepped closer, not imposing, simply present. "We all grow up with walls we did not build, and often we spend our lives defending them, never stopping to ask what lies beyond." She looked up, her eyes raw. "Why didn't you come here to fight me? I was so cruel. I attacked everything you believe." Imam Yusuf replied without hesitation, "Because truth doesn't shout. It doesn't humiliate. It reaches hearts. That's why I'm here, not to win, but to offer a window out of the prison of misunderstanding." For the first time, Olivia turned away from the audience. Her voice was gone. Her certainty vanished. She was no longer a preacher. She was a seeker, lost in the echoes of what she once believed. And then the senior priest stepped forward, his voice barely steady. "I must admit," he said, "I never imagined I'd witness someone stand on this floor and speak of another faith with such calm. Here is your rephrased and rewritten version, kept faithful in length, detail, and emotion while enhancing clarity, rhythm, and flow." With compassion, not provocation. Imam Yusuf bowed his head slightly. Compassion does not mean compromise. One can speak with conviction and still be merciful. I didn't come to attack the church. I came because when truth is misrepresented, it must respond. The priest slowly turned to Olivia. "What are you feeling right now?" Olivia clutched the pulpit, her hands trembling. "It feels like I've been shouting for years." And then someone whispered, and suddenly everything changed. I don't even know who I am anymore. Imam Yusuf's glas je bilo nisko, blago. You are someone standing on the threshold of truth. That's not something to fear. It's something to cherish. She looked at him again. "But I still have doubts. I don't understand everything. Doesn't that mean I'm unworthy?" He shook his head. Doubt is not defiance. It's a natural part of the journey. True faith is not built in a single moment. It's formed in the spaces where you dare to question without shame and listen without defensiveness. Suddenly, Olivia asked, "Then tell me, what did your prophet say when he bowed in prayer?" Imam Yusuf smiled softly. It's a simple phrase, yet it carries the weight of surrender and devotion. He said, "Glory be to my Lord, the Most High." Olivia closed her eyes and repeated the words quietly, not out of obligation, but from a place of honest curiosity. Her lips trembled as she whispered them again. A hush fell over the church. For the first time in that sacred place, a woman known for publicly condemning Islam had just uttered words of reverence, words that connected her to the very faith she once feared. tears rolled down her cheeks. The congregation sat in silence, many visibly moved. Even those who had arrived with suspicion were witnessing something too deep to deny. "I'm not ready to convert," Olivia said, her voice breaking, "but for the first time in my life, I've tasted peace, and it came from something I was always told to fear." Imam Youssef nodded, his expression both calm and moved. "There's no need to rush. Truth is patient. It waits. It knocks gently. And when your heart is ready, you won't have to force anything. It will unfold on its own." The priest placed a hand on her shoulder. "We've all held beliefs we never questioned, but today, you questioned, and that's not betrayal. That's courage." From the back pew, an elderly woman slowly stood. Her hair was silver, her eyes tired. "I always believed Islam was a threat," she said softly, almost ashamed. "But I never truly listened. I never heard it from someone who lives it." She turned to Imam Youssef. "Thank you." He bowed his head. "Truth doesn't belong to one group. It belongs to anyone who seeks it." Olivia stepped down from the pulpit. Her legs shook, but her steps were steady. She walked toward Imam Youssef and stood before him. The woman who once roared with certainty now stood in silence, like a student before her teacher. "I don't know what happens next," she whispered, "but I want to keep learning. I want to understand more. I don't want to be afraid anymore." Imam Youssef extended his hand, not to shake, but as an invitation, a symbol of a journey just beginning. "Then walk," he said, "not toward me, but toward truth. Let it lead you at its own pace." She nodded, and in that moment, something unspoken shifted. The church was no longer a battleground of ideologies. It had become a sanctuary for hearts, a meeting place between confusion and clarity. That evening, there was no applause, no heated discussions, no announcements, just silence. A sacred, weighty silence. A woman, once driven by anger, had taken her first step toward stillness. A congregation once united by shared opposition now sat in personal reflection. And one stranger, with nothing but his words, had shown them all that truth does not break through walls with violence. It enters quietly, like morning light through stained glass. That night, after the gathering at the Church of San Marco, was unlike any other. The members of the congregation didn't leave in protest or outrage. They left in silence, deep, thoughtful silence. For some, it was the first time in years they looked at their Bibles not for comfort, but for confirmation. For others, Imam Youssef's words kept echoing, unshakable. But for Sister Olivia, the night stretched long and restless. She sat at her window, eyes on the stars, tears dried on her cheeks. There was a strange stillness inside her, a calm that unsettled and soothed at the same time. It felt like a storm had passed, but its memory remained. She whispered to herself, "Why did peace wash over me when I spoke those words? Why does it feel like something inside me broke, beautifully?" The days passed. Olivia did not preach. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. But within her, questions bloomed like wildflowers in neglected soil. A week later, she did something unexpected. She visited Imam Youssef again. This time, not in a grand cathedral, but in a small prayer room, humble, serene. No paintings, no ornate symbols, just quiet. And him, sitting calmly on a simple rug. "Thank you for seeing me," she said gently. "You came," he replied with a warm smile. "That's what matters." "I'm still confused," she admitted, "but it's like a curtain has been pulled back, and I can't close it again." He nodded. Clarity rarely arrives all at once. It's like the dawn. Darkness first, then a faint glow, and finally full light. She looked down at her hands. "People ask why I've gone silent. I don't know what to tell them. I'm not Muslim, but I can't defend what I used to believe anymore." Imam Yusef poured tea and handed her a cup in silence. I came today, she continued, with one last set of questions. Not to debate, but because I need answers. For me, not the church. He nodded. Ask. She took a breath. If your religion is about peace, then why do I see so much suffering among Muslims? In Palestine, in parts of Asia, in Africa, even here in the West. Why doesn't your God intervene? Why doesn't he rescue the innocent? His face shifted, not with anger, but with sorrow. Her question had pierced something personal. Because paradise is not cheap, he said quietly. She blinked. What do you mean? Our scripture teaches that belief must be tested. Those who say, we believe, are not left without trial. And those trials, whether oppression, loss, or pain, are meant to purify the soul. He leaned closer. His voice carried more weight now. When a child starves in Gaza, when a woman is barred from prayer, when a man is jailed for his faith, these are not signs of divine neglect. They are echoes of a broken world, where evil still has its turn. But isn't that unfair? Olivia asked, her voice trembling. Why allow it? Because free will exists. Because this world is not the destination. It's the bridge, a test. And in the life to come, the oppressed will rise, and the oppressors will be judged. He paused. And it is often in pain that hearts open. Suffering softens what comfort never could. Olivia stared into her tea. I was taught that suffering was punishment. Imam Yusef shook his head. Sometimes Sufa,